The wind over the New Mexico desert carried a cruel edge that morning, the kind that found every tear in a woman's dress and every weakness in her heart. Evelyn Moore rode side saddle behind her husband Samuel on the long stretch of road between Santa Fe and the unknown. The air was dry, but her throat felt drier still, from silence, not dust. They had been married barely a year. Once she had thought Samuel's dark eyes were kind. Once she had imagined a home with children laughing at her skirts, a small ranch by the cottonwoods, and peace. But that dream died the day the town doctor told Samuel the truth: she would never bear a child. From that day, his hand grew heavier, his words sharper, and his patience thinner. In a land where a woman's worth was tied to the cradle, Evelyn had become a burden he couldn't sell or stomach. When the wagon trail grew thin and the horizon swallowed the sun, Samuel pulled the reins to a stop. "This is where we part ways," he said flatly. Evelyn blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He didn't meet her eyes. "I mean, you'll find your way back to town or you won't. Either way, I'm through." Her breath hitched, the sound small against the emptiness of the plains. "Samuel, please." He swung into his saddle, already turning away. "You should have told me before the vows." "I didn't know," she whispered, but the wind carried her words away. He rode off without a backward glance. The dust his horse kicked up was the last thing she saw of him. Evelyn stood alone, the world stretching vast and pitiless around her. The sun dipped low, and the first bite of desert cold began to creep into her bones. She had a shawl, a canteen half empty, and a heart that suddenly understood what it meant to be truly unwanted. She walked. Each step felt heavier, her skirts catching on thorn and rock, her boots blistering her feet. The land turned to stone ridges and ghost-colored sagebrush. Coyotes howled from somewhere far off, and her own fear howled quieter but closer. When she finally stumbled upon a creek, she knelt beside it and drank until her reflection blurred. Her fingers were blue from cold, her lips cracked and bleeding. She pressed her hands together, whispering a prayer she hadn't said in years. "Lord, if you're listening, I don't ask for a child anymore. Just let me live long enough to see morning." But the desert has its own ways of answering prayers. When she awoke, she didn't remember falling asleep. A shadow loomed over her, tall, still and silent. The figure wore buckskin and beads that caught the pale moonlight. His hair hung long, tied with rawhide, and his dark eyes watched her with something between caution and curiosity. An Apache. She gasped and tried to rise, but her limbs failed her. The man crouched, examining her face. Then, with slow movements, he lifted his waterskin and held it toward her lips. She hesitated, staring into eyes that revealed no cruelty, only quiet strength. When she drank, he nodded once, as though her trust was a language he understood. Her mind, weak and fading, clung to fragments of fear. They said the Apache kill without mercy, but this one did not strike her. Instead, he wrapped her in a deerskin cloak, lifted her into his arms as though she weighed nothing, and carried her toward the red cliffs under the fading stars. As her head rested against his chest, Evelyn caught the scent of smoke and cedar. His heart beat steady, unhurried, like the pulse of the earth itself. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was not of her husband, nor the home she had lost, but of that steady rhythm, the sound of life where she thought none remained. And so began the story of the Baron, bride, and the warrior who would teach her that brokenness was never the end, only the beginning. Evelyn woke to warmth, not the harsh blaze of the desert sun, but the steady, living warmth of a fire. For a long moment, she didn't dare move. The scent of smoke mixed with pine needles filled her lungs, and she heard the crackle of burning wood, the sigh of wind through narrow canyon walls. Then memory returned in jagged flashes, Samuel's cold words, the empty trail, and the dark figure who had found her by the creek. She opened her eyes. The place around her was a narrow shelter. Half cave, half lean-to built from animal hides stretched over a frame of wood. The Apache man sat near the entrance, his back to her, sharpening a blade on a whetstone. His movements were calm, precise, and silent as falling snow. Her throat tightened. She pushed herself up, the deerskin slipping from her shoulders. Where am I?" she whispered. The man didn't answer at first. He paused, set the blade aside, and turned. Firelight revealed strong features, high cheekbones, bronze skin, and eyes like dark amber, reflecting every flicker of flame. "You live," he said simply. His voice was low, roughened by years of command, but not unkind. Evelyn clutched the hide closer. "Why did you bring me here?" He studied her for a heartbeat before replying. "You were dying. Cold takes women fast." She looked around, her soaked boots drying by the fire, her hair combed out, her hands wrapped in cloth. You did all this?" He nodded once. "Why?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, though not quite a smile. "A hawk does not ask why it flies. A man does not leave a life to die." Evelyn lowered her eyes, unsure what to say. Every tale she'd ever heard of the Apache spoke of raids and vengeance. Yet this man had carried her here, tended her wounds, and shared his fire. Nothing about him fit the stories. "I have no food to offer you," she murmured, ashamed. "No way to repay your kindness." He rose to his full height, tall, broad-shouldered, with the easy stillness of a man who feared nothing. "I did not ask payment." He walked to the fire and stirred it with a stick, adding another log. Sparks leapt upward, glowing gold against the red stone walls. After a moment, he spoke again. "You should eat." He handed her a piece of roasted rabbit, its smell rich and smoky. Her stomach clenched with hunger. She hesitated only a second before taking it. The first bite burned her tongue, but she didn't care. The taste of food after days of nothing felt like mercy itself. As she ate, she caught him watching her with quiet amusement, as though he'd seen too many hungry souls to judge another. "What do they call you?" she asked softly. "Tahoma," he said. "Tahoma," she repeated, the name awkward but musical on her lips. "Thank you." He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "You?" "Evelyn." He said it slowly, tasting the foreign syllables. "Evelyn." Then nodded. "You should sleep, Evelyn. Tomorrow we move." "Move where?" "Someplace safer. Cold comes stronger each night." She hesitated. "You'll take me with you?" Tahoma looked at her steadily. "You cannot walk alone." "Not here." There was no pity in his tone, only fact. She found herself believing him, believing in him. Somehow, this man who lived by silence and instinct had more honor than all the men she had known in the settlements. When he turned away, she whispered, almost to herself, "I thought your people hated mine." He paused, his back to her. "Some do," he said at last, "but hate is heavy. I have carried enough." Then he lay down on the other side of the fire, his knife within reach, his breathing steady and slow. Evelyn curled beneath the deerskin, staring at the shadows dancing on the cave wall. For the first time since her husband left her to die, she did not feel afraid. Out beyond the cliffs, the desert wind howled, but inside that small shelter, mercy had found her in the form of a man who spoke little and saved her life without asking who she was or why she'd been left behind. The journey to the Apache village took 2 long days through wind and stone. Evelyn rode behind Tahoma on his horse, her hands clutching the folds of his deerskin coat as the land rolled endlessly beneath them, red cliffs, mesquite brush, and riverbeds that gleamed like silver snakes in the sun. She said little, not out of fear but out of awe. The land was wild, endless, and brutally honest. It asked for nothing but strength, the same kind of quiet strength she saw in the man who guided her by dusk on the second day. The air grew thick with the scent of smoke and roasting corn. The sound of distant drums reached her ears, a rhythm like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Tahoma slowed his horse as they entered a clearing filled with small lodges made of willow frames and hides. Children stopped their play to stare. Women paused in their work, eyes sharp and curious. Men stood taller, hands resting near their bows. A murmur spread through the camp like wind over dry grass. A white woman. With Tahoma. He brings her here? She is cursed. Look at her skin, pale as death. Evelyn's cheeks burned. She wanted to disappear into the earth. Tahoma dismounted first, then turned to lift her down. His grip was firm but careful, steadying her trembling legs. Walk, he said quietly. She obeyed, trying not to look at the faces that followed her. A few older women whispered behind their hands. A young girl pointed at her hair, golden and tangled, as though it were something from a dream dot at the center of the village. An elder emerged from one of the lodges, a man with hair white as the winter peaks and eyes clouded by age but bright with wisdom. Tahoma, the elder said in Apache, his tone both questioning and reproachful. Tahoma bowed his head slightly. Their words passed quickly, too fast for Evelyn to understand, but the tension in the air was sharp as a blade. When the elder's gaze finally settled on her, she felt stripped bare. After a long moment, he sighed and said something softer. Tahoma translated. He says you may stay. For a while. Her heart loosened, just a little. Tell him. Thank you. Tahoma relayed her words, and the old man nodded before walking away. The people dispersed slowly, though their eyes lingered. The whispers didn't stop. That night, Tahoma brought her to a small lodge at the edge of the village, simple but warm. He built a fire and handed her a clay bowl of stew. You are safe here, he said. Evelyn looked up from the bowl. They don't seem to want me. They don't know you, he replied. They fear what they do not know. She hesitated, then asked softly, What do they say about me? He studied her face for a long moment, then answered without cruelty. They say you are barren, that you carry sorrow too deep for life to grow. Her heart clenched. Even here, among strangers, her greatest shame had followed her. And you? She whispered. What do you believe? Tahoma stirred the fire with a stick. The flames reflected in his eyes like molten amber. I believe the earth gives life in many ways, he said. A tree that bears no fruit still gives shade, still stands strong in the storm. Evelyn swallowed hard. No one had ever spoken of her barrenness with such gentleness, not as a curse, but as something that could still hold meaning. He rose and handed her a small figure, carved from clay, a woman holding a child to her chest. My mother made this, he said quietly. It is not for pity. It is for strength. She took it with trembling fingers, emotion tightening her throat. I don't know how to thank you. Live, he said simply. That is enough. When he left her alone for the night, Evelyn sat by the firelight, staring at the small clay figure. The whispers of the village still lingered outside, but inside her lodge, she heard only one voice, Tahoma's steady words echoing in her heart. Barren tree can still offer shade. And for the first time, Evelyn wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't cursed after all. The morning sun spilled gold across the cliffs, catching dust in its light and painting the village in shades of fire and amber. Evelyn stepped outside her small lodge, her fingers clutching the clay figure Tahoma had given her the night before. The whispers of the villagers had quieted, replaced by the hum of daily life, children laughing, women pounding corn, men mending tools. Tahoma appeared at her side, silent as the shadows. "Today you learn," he said. "We rise with the sun, work with the land, respect the spirits." Evelyn nodded, uncertain. She had never known a life that demanded such constant effort. In the settlements, women cleaned, cooked, and obeyed. Here, survival required understanding the land, listening to it, even feeling it beneath your bare feet. Her first task was simple in theory, grinding corn into meal. But when she lifted the heavy stone, her arms shook. Tahoma watched silently, then guided her hands, showing the rhythm, forward, back, steady. Sweat ran down her neck, mixing with the dirt on her cheeks. She wanted to give up, but the patience in his eyes held her in place. "Again," he said after she faltered. "And again," until her hands moved with a strange grace, the rhythm echoing in her chest like a heartbeat. Next came weaving baskets. At first, the reeds tore in her unskilled fingers, the knots slipping. The village women watched, curiosity in their eyes, some amusement, some suspicion. Tahoma's hand hovered near hers, not interfering, only guiding subtly when she faltered. By midday, she had a crude basket, crooked, but hers. "Better than yesterday," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Every day will be better than yesterday." Evelyn began to understand. Tahoma's lessons were not about perfection. They were about presence, patience, and trust. And as she worked, she noticed the villagers' attitudes shift. The children peeked from behind their mothers. Some of the women offered tips. The men nodded when she passed. She was slowly becoming part of this new world. Even as her past clung to her like a shadow. By afternoon, Tahoma led her to the river. "Horses," he said, gesturing. A young Mari neighed softly. "Ride." Evelyn's heart leapt with fear. She had ridden side saddle behind Samuel, but never alone, never over rough terrain. Her legs trembled as she mounted, and the horse shifted beneath her. Tahoma's hand steadied her at first, then let go. "Balance with the horse. Feel it move beneath you. Trust it, and trust yourself." Her chest heaved, the wind rushing past her face as the Mari trotted along the river bank. Fear and exhilaration wove together. For the first time since Samuel abandoned her, she felt alive, not just surviving, but moving, conquering, learning. Afterward, Tahoma guided her to a small patch of herbs near the lodge. "Medicine," he said. "The land heals if you know its ways." He showed her how to crush leaves, mix roots, and soothe bruises. He made her tend to a sick child whose fever had the villagers worried. Evelyn worked, hand steady, heart racing. When the child's breathing eased, she realized she had done something meaningful. She had saved a life. That night, as the fire crackled, Evelyn felt a shift inside her. The shame that had weighed her down, the fear of being barren and unwanted, began to lift. Tahoma sat nearby, polishing his knife, silent yet present. His quiet strength had become a lifeline, a beacon. "You are learning," he said, almost to himself. She met his eyes. "Not just the work," she said softly. "I think I am learning to live." He nodded, the firelight flickering across his face. Living is the first step. Everything else comes after. For the first time in months, Evelyn slept without fear that the desert or Samuel would claim her. She had a place, a purpose, and a teacher who saw beyond her past. And as dawn approached, she realized the world was no longer something to endure. It was something she could shape, if only she dared. The sky over the cliffs darkened abruptly, a sudden heaviness settling in the air. Evelyn and Tahoma had been tending the crops and checking traps along the river when the first rumbles of thunder shook the canyon. Clouds, black and swollen, rolled in like an unstoppable tide, blotting out the sun. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She had seen storms before, but never with such intensity, never in a land so wild and unprotected. "We need to get back," she said, urgency threading her voice. Tahoma's eyes scanned the horizon. "Too late for the village. We take shelter in the canyon." The wind whipped across the cliffs, tearing at her skirts and hair. Rain fell in sheets, icy and relentless. The river swelled, spilling over its banks, churning mud and debris into a roaring torrent. Evelyn's teeth chattered, and her fingers, numb from cold and fear, clung to the straps of her pack. Tahomi moved with calm precision, guiding the horse through the slippery mud. "Keep close," he commanded, his voice steady over the roar of the storm. "Do not let go." They reached a small overhang, a natural cave that jutted from the canyon wall. Water streamed around its edges, but inside it was dry, sheltered. Tahoma led the horse inside, lowering Evelyn gently to the ground. She sank to her knees, shivering uncontrollably. He stripped the wet outer layers from her shoulders, wrapping her in a heavy blanket he carried. For a moment, she resisted, embarrassed by her trembling. But he said nothing, only held her close, letting her body press against his warmth. The storm raged outside, wind screaming through the canyon like a chorus of spirits. Lightning lit the cave in stark white flashes, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the very rocks. Evelyn clutched Tahoma's arm, heart hammering. "I've never been so afraid," she admitted. He tightened his hold, his voice low, steady, almost a promise. "Fear is natural, but you're safe here. With me." She wanted to believe him, but the terror gnawed at her. What if something happens?" "Nothing will happen," he said. "Not while I am here." The fire he kindled was small but fierce, its glow flickering across the walls of the cave. Evelyn pressed closer, letting his warmth seep into her frozen limbs. For the first time in years, someone's presence felt like protection, not judgment. Hours passed in the storm's fury. Evelyn spoke little, but in the silence, Tahoma told her stories of his lost wife, of his child taken by sickness long ago, of the rivers and mountains he had traveled. She listened, feeling the weight of his grief as if it were her own. When she told him fragments of her life, Samuel's abandonment, the doctor's cruel words, the shame she carried, he listened without interruption, without pity, only understanding. At one point, lightning struck a distant cliff, illuminating his face. In that fleeting flash, she saw something raw and human, the loss, the strength, the patient fire that had drawn her from the brink of death. Evelyn's tears mingled with rain on her cheeks as she whispered, "I don't know how to thank you for saving me. For carrying me here?" Tahoma shook his head slowly. "You do not need to thank me. You survive. That is enough." She leaned against him, exhausted, her body and mind surrendering to a rare sense of peace. For hours, she let the storm rage outside while inside the cave. They simply existed together, two souls bound by survival, trust, and the unspoken understanding that this night, this storm, had changed them both. By the time the first light of dawn crept into the canyon, the rain had stopped. Evelyn sat on the edge of the cave, staring at the river, now a silvery, trembling ribbon. She felt different. Braver, steadier, more alive. The terror of the night had passed, leaving behind a new awareness. With Tahoma, she could endure anything, and in the quiet after the storm, she realized something she had not admitted to herself until now. She trusted him, completely, and for the first time. She felt the faint stirrings of hope in her own heart. The days after the storm were crisp and bright, as if the world itself had been washed clean. Evelyn rose before dawn, her muscles still sore from the journey and the storm, but her spirit lighter. Tahoma had taught her that life in the Apache way demanded more than courage. It demanded attentiveness, patience, and respect for the subtle rhythms of nature. Today, You will learn healing, Tahoma said simply, leading her to a small garden of herbs near the edge of the village. Leaves glistened with dew, the scent of sage and mint drifting in the cool morning air. The land provides. You must only understand it. He handed her a small bundle of herbs. Fever, he said, from heat or from sickness. Watch the leaves. Crush them. Smell them. Learn their voices. Evelyn's hands shook as she worked. She had grown up in town, learning only basic remedies: a poultice, a tincture, a stitch. Here, Tahoma's ways were different, precise, deliberate, respectful of life. He guided her hands, showing how to pound the leaves gently, mix roots without bruising them, and boil water over a fire without letting it scorch the medicine. You have the touch, he said, watching her. The hands can heal if the heart is steady. She hesitated, unsure what he meant, until he gestured toward a small girl sitting nearby, pale and listless, fever burning her cheeks. Evelyn's chest tightened. The same helplessness she had felt when Samuel abandoned her threatened to return, but Tahoma's presence grounded her. Go, he said softly. You can do this. Evelyn knelt beside the girl, dipping the cloth into the warm herbal infusion. She pressed it gently to the child's forehead, feeling the warmth seep into her own hands. The girl stirred, and for the first time in days, a faint color returned to her cheeks. Tahoma knelt beside her. See, you are the channel. The plant, the water, the hands, all tools. But your calm, your attention, your care, that is what heals. Evelyn felt a strange, almost electric thrill. She had spent so long believing herself broken, barren in every sense, that the ability to give life, even to nurture and soothe, was astonishing. The child's fever subsided over the day, her laughter returning as the sun climbed high, and Evelyn's confidence grew with every small victory. Later, Tahoma led her to the river bank. Some wounds are not on the skin, he said, holding her gaze. Some wounds are in the heart, the spirit. You must learn to heal those too. He demonstrated breathing techniques, slow and deliberate, hands hovering over a small flame. Energy flows from the body, through the heart, through the hands. Calm the mind, and the body follows. Touch is not only physical, it carries intention. Evelyn mimicked him, her hands trembling at first. Slowly, she began to feel warmth radiate, a tingling energy that connected her to Tahoma, to the earth, to the river that flowed endlessly below the cliffs. She placed her hands gently on his arm, then withdrew, unsure. Good, he said, a rare softness in his voice. You have learned faster than most. Days passed in a rhythm she had never known, gathering herbs, tending wounds, riding, weaving, learning the land. Evelyn began to notice changes within herself. Her body no longer felt weak or useless. Her mind no longer dwelled on past shame. She could act, care, create, and in doing so, she felt alive again. One evening, as the sun bled red over the canyon, Evelyn sat by the fire, Tahoma polishing his blade nearby. She turned to him. I never thought I could feel useful again. Not after everything. He looked at her steadily, his amber eyes soft in the firelight. You have always been capable. You just needed someone to show you the way. Evelyn's throat tightened. For the first time, she realized that healing was more than herbs and hands. It was trust, patience, and acceptance. Tahoma had given her life again, not just physically, but in the quiet rebuilding of her spirit. And as the night settled over the cliffs, Evelyn understood the truth. Perhaps the most profound healing did not come from the earth, the fire, or even the herbs. It came from a steady, patient heart willing to see her not as broken, but as whole. The crisp air of early morning carried the scent of burning wood and pine as Evelyn tended the garden outside her lodge. The village had begun to accept her, children waved as she passed, and the women shared quiet advice about herbs and weaving. Life had settled into a rhythm, and for the first time, she felt a fragile sense of belonging. But the peace of the canyon is never guaranteed. A cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, rising and rolling across the plains like an omen. Evelyn squinted, hands shielding her eyes. Riders approached, not scouts, not hunters, but men on well-fed horses, their uniforms dark against the sun. Her chest tightened as she recognized the foremost rider, Samuel, her former husband. He pulled up abruptly at the edge of the village, eyes flashing with anger and something else, perhaps disbelief. Behind him were two others, armed with rifles and the authority of men who believed in their right to claim what they once possessed. Tahoma stepped beside her, tall and calm, and murmured, "Do not move. Let them see the truth." Samuel leapt from his horse, boots stirring the dust. "Tahoma, release her!" he barked, his voice full of outrage. "She is mine by law. She is my wife." Evelyn's heart thudded painfully. Part of her trembled, the familiar fear, the old shame that had haunted her since the doctor's verdict. Another part, the part she had nurtured in the canyon, stiffened with resolve. She was no longer helpless, no longer the frightened bride abandoned in the desert. Tahoma's hand rested lightly on his bow, the gesture calm, controlled, yet loaded with authority. He stepped forward, voice even but commanding. "She is under my protection. You will take nothing from this village. You will not harm her." Samuel's face darkened. "I gave you everything." You gave her nothing but shame," Tahoma interrupted. "She is free." Evelyn felt a swell of courage, her voice trembling but firm. "I am not yours to claim. You left me to die. You abandoned me when I needed you most." The elder of the village, now standing behind Tahoma, added his voice in slow, deliberate English for clarity. "This woman has chosen her path. Your claim is void. Leave her in peace." Samuel's anger flared, but the weight of the village and the authority of Tahoma kept him in check. The soldiers beside him shifted uneasily. Tahoma continued, his tone quiet but edged with steel. "She has found her strength here. You cannot undo that. Your threats mean nothing in this canyon." Evelyn took a step forward, the first step she had taken alone in months. She met Samuel's gaze squarely. "I have learned to live again. I have learned to care for others, to survive, and to trust. That is my life, not yours, not the past. I choose it." The wind carried her words, sharp and true. The dust swirled around them, and for the first time, Samuel seemed to see her not as a possession, but as a person, strong, alive, and unafraid. He ground his teeth, then mounted his horse, finally turning away. "This isn't over," he muttered. Though even he seemed unsure if he could reclaim her spirit. As the riders disappeared over the horizon, Evelyn sank to the ground, relief mingling with exhaustion. Tahoma knelt beside her, offering a hand, not with authority, but with gentle reassurance. "You stood for yourself," he said quietly. "You did not falter." Evelyn placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and steadiness she had come to rely on. "I had help," she admitted, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I had you." Tahoma's amber eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, the canyon was silent. The storm of the past swept away, leaving only the quiet certainty of trust and protection. And in that moment, Evelyn understood fully. The past might return, but it no longer had power over her. She had chosen life, courage, and belonging. She had chosen the path that led her to Tahoma, the man who had seen her not as broken, but as whole. For the first time, she felt that no one could take that from her. The sun hung low over the canyon. painting the cliffs in streaks of orange and crimson as Evelyn worked beside Tahoma in the garden. The rhythm of life here had become second nature, planting, gathering herbs, tending to animals, and yet her mind still lingered on the events of that morning. Samuel's intrusion had shaken the village, but more importantly, it had tested something inside her, the fragile truth of her own heart. Tahoma approached silently, carrying a basket of freshly gathered herbs. "You seem distracted," he observed, his voice low and calm. Evelyn paused, brushing dirt from her hands. "It's him," she admitted. "Samuel. I don't know if I'll ever stop feeling afraid when I think of him. He reminds me of everything I lost before I met you." Tahoma set the basket down and knelt beside her. "And yet you stood firm. You chose your own path, Evelyn. That is courage." She looked at him, the amber eyes steady and unwavering, and felt the stirrings of something deeper than gratitude. A warmth she had never allowed herself to feel toward anyone in years. She remembered the long nights of the storm, the hours by the fire, the hands that healed not just her body but her broken spirit. "Tahoma," she began, hesitating, "how do you know what is right for me?" He studied her for a moment. "Because I see you. Not the past. Not the rumors. Not what others say you cannot be. I see who you truly are." Evelyn's throat tightened. For so long she had believed herself worthless, her barrenness defining her. Yet here, in the arms of the man who had saved her from death and despair, she realized something extraordinary. She was valued not for what she could give, but for who she was. That evening, after the village had settled and the children were asleep, Tahoma led her to a cliff overlooking the valley. The wind tugged at her hair, and the sky was alive with stars. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and charged with unspoken feelings. "Evelyn," he said softly, "you are free. Free to choose. Free to return to your people if you wish." She swallowed hard. "And if I choose to stay?" His gaze softened, the fire of the sun setting behind him casting a halo of light across his face. "Then I will walk beside you, not as a protector, but as your companion. Whatever you wish, whatever you become." Her heart raced. She thought of the past months, the terror, the storms, the quiet lessons of life and healing, the courage she had discovered within herself. And she thought of him, patient, steadfast, unwavering, and the bond that had grown between them, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. "I choose to stay," she whispered. He reached for her hand, holding it firmly yet gently. "Then we walk forward together," he said. Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of peace she had not known in years. She realized that love was not about possession or obligation. It was about trust, respect, and the willingness to stand beside another through storms, fear, and joy. That night, they returned to the village together. Children peeked from their lodges, and the women smiled quietly, understanding something unspoken. Evelyn had found a place, and more importantly, she had found a heart that recognized hers as she lay under the blanket of stars later. Evelyn thought of Samuel, of the life she had been forced to leave behind, and of the courage it had taken to claim her own path. She felt no bitterness, only the clarity that the choice she had made was right, and in that clarity, she understood the simplest truth of all. Sometimes, the hardest journey is not surviving the past, but choosing the heart that will carry you into the future. In the quiet of the night, Evelyn closed her eyes, holding onto Tahoma's steady hand, and finally allowed herself to believe in hope, in love, and in a life she could call entirely her own. Spring had arrived in the canyon, painting the cliffs and valley below with bursts of green and gold. The air smelled of new growth, wildflowers, and the faint, sweet scent of the river. Evelyn moved among the plants she had nurtured, her hands strong and sure. Her heart lighter than it had been in years. She paused at a small patch of herbs, brushing the dew from the leaves. When Tahoma approached, carrying a folded cloth. His eyes, amber and steady as always, held a quiet intensity. "Evelyn," he said softly, kneeling before her, "the spirits have come to bless us." She tilted her head, puzzled. "Bless us?" He unfolded the cloth, revealing a tiny bundle wrapped carefully in soft linen. Her heart leapt before she even realized why. "It is yours," he said. "A gift from the spirits for your patience, your courage, and your heart." Her hands trembled as she lifted the bundle. Inside, a small life stirred. A baby girl, her dark eyes wide and curious, her tiny fingers curling instinctively. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she was speechless. She is mine? Evelyn whispered, though instinct told her the answer. Tahoma nodded. "She is yours and ours. A child for the woman who survived the storm, healed the sick, and learned the ways of life again." Tears filled her eyes, and she held the baby close, feeling warmth, hope, and love all mingling in a single overwhelming tide. Her mind flashed back to the years of fear and shame, the doctor's verdict, Samuel's abandonment, the bitter nights of cold and loneliness, and she realized that every hardship had led her to this moment. Tahoma knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. "You thought your heart was barren," he said quietly, "but it was only waiting for the right time, the right life, the right place to bloom." Evelyn pressed the baby to her chest, feeling the steady heartbeat against her own. She realized she had never truly understood hope until now, not as an abstract idea, but as a living, breathing presence in her arms. The villagers approached cautiously. Children peeking from behind mothers, elders smiling quietly. They had watched Evelyn grow stronger, heal, and become part of their world. Now, as they beheld the new life in her arms, whispers turned from caution to awe. One of the village women stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "The spirits honor you," she said. "You are one of us now, and your child carries both worlds, your courage and our strength." Evelyn looked up at Tahoma, her eyes glistening. "I don't know how I could have hoped for anything like this." He smiled, a rare, small curve of his lips. "Sometimes life gives more than we imagine, but you had to survive, to learn, to trust. Only then could the spirits bring their gift." The baby cooed softly, and Evelyn laughed through tears, feeling an elation so deep it shook her. She rocked the child gently, whispering promises of love, protection, and a life full of wonder. She had been broken, abandoned, and forgotten. But now she was whole, a mother, a partner, a woman who had reclaimed her destiny that night. As the canyon slept under a sky full of stars, Evelyn held her daughter close. Tahoma sat nearby, bow across his knees, watching her with quiet pride and unspoken devotion. She knew that the path that had brought her here, through storms, fear, and the shadows of the past had been necessary, for it had prepared her for the greatest gift of all, new life, hope, and the enduring strength of love. For the first time, Evelyn whispered a prayer not for survival, not for protection, but for gratitude. And in the quiet of the canyon, the spirits answered with a soft, steady wind that rustled the leaves and carried the scent of life forward into the future. The canyon was alive with the golden glow of dawn. Sunlight spilled over the cliffs, casting long shadows that danced across the valley floor, and the river below gleamed like molten silver. Evelyn stood at the edge of the lodge, cradling her daughter in her arms, feeling the warmth of life and hope settle deep in her bones. The months had passed in a rhythm both steady and miraculous. Her child thrived, a living testament to the healing, love, and resilience Evelyn had found within herself. Every morning brought new lessons, the feel of tiny hands gripping hers, the first hesitant steps, the delighted laughter that echoed across the cliffs. Her life was full, vibrant, and entirely hers. Tahoma approached silently, as he always did, carrying water in a carved wooden vessel. He knelt beside her, offering a small smile. "She is strong," he said softly, glancing at their daughter. Evelyn returned his gaze, amber eyes meeting hers. "She is ours," she said, the weight of the word carrying all the meaning of survival, trust, and love. Together they walked through the village, Evelyn's small hand guiding her child's tiny fingers. The villagers watched them pass with quiet admiration. The whispers that had once marked her as barren or cursed were gone, replaced by respect, affection, and the understanding that she had earned her place. Children ran ahead, laughing, and women nodded in approval as they carried baskets and tended the fires. Even the elders, who had once watched her with skepticism, smiled quietly, acknowledging that Evelyn had bridged two worlds, that of her settler past and her new Apache home. Evelyn paused by the river bank, the water reflecting her image and that of the child in her arms. She traced a finger through the current, thinking of how far she had come, from abandonment and shame to safety, love, and the miraculous gift of life. Every storm she had weathered, every fear she had faced, had led her here. Tahoma stood beside her, silent, yet his presence was a steady anchor. "You are different now," he said, almost as a statement to himself. "You are whole." She smiled, resting her daughter's head against her shoulder. "I am," she agreed, "and it is because of everything I endured." "And because of you?" He did not respond immediately. Instead, he watched the child as she reached out to touch a floating leaf in the river. Then he placed a steady hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "You were never barren," he said quietly. "You only needed warmth, patience, and the courage to believe in life again. You have given her that and so much more." Evelyn looked up at the cliffs, at the sky, at the village that had become her home. She saw the children playing freely, the rivers and the red rocks bathed in morning light, and she understood fully. She was the mother of two worlds. She carried the legacy of her past while embracing the life she had been given here, a life of love, strength, and belonging. Her daughter giggled, reaching for a wildflower by the bank. Evelyn lifted her higher, laughing, feeling the joy of a woman who had known loss and emerged triumphant. She had learned that motherhood was not merely about giving birth. It was about nurturing, protecting, and choosing love every single day. Tahoma knelt to kiss the top of their child's head. "You are family," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "All of us together." Evelyn leaned against him, holding her daughter close, her heart full. The canyon around them seemed to echo her own triumph. The wind whispered through the cliffs. The river sang as it flowed, and the sun rose steadily. A promise of new beginnings for Evelyn Moore. The girl who had been abandoned, shunned, and told she could never bear life, the world had transformed. She was no longer a woman defined by what she lacked. She was a woman who had survived storms, healed hearts, and embraced love. She was a mother, a partner, a bridge between two worlds, and she had finally found the life she was meant to live. As the morning light warmed her face, she whispered softly to her child, "We are home. And this is only the beginning." The canyon answered in kind, carrying their laughter and hope across the cliffs, forever marking the place where a barren bride became a mother of two worlds.